All right, let's get started. Hello, my name is Bill Newton, and I'm one of the marketing associates here at Fpweb.net. With me today is Brad Gleeson, our Vice President of Client Development.
It's not a holiday.
It's
I'm
not.
not. It feels kind of weird doing this without it being some type of holiday.
That's true. It's just a regular Tuesday, but not a regular webinar topic.
Nope.
Today we're covering USA-based Premier support. Brad's going to do a little discussing and a little question answering about Microsoft Premier Support alternatives. So that's kind of the agenda for today. Let me advance the slides here so you can get a look at Brad. So there's Brad Gleeson, like I said.
And just a quick update:
Mhm.
I've not lost any weight since the last performance. So unfortunately, Fat Tuesday, kind of did me in for a while. So. But man, what a beautiful day here in St. Louis.
Absolutely.
And thinking about spring, getting back out on that bike, and you betcha. So spring means a lot of things, right? Spring cleaning, perhaps.
That's true. Yeah.
And along with those lines, when I think of spring cleaning, maybe some of the services that you are currently having from a company perspective may also need some spring cleaning as well.
That's true. As you start looking down the calendar toward the end of the fiscal year, and then what contracts may or may not be up for renewal. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So just to talk a little bit more about what we're going to discuss here is what we know for sure about Microsoft Premier Support. We're going to talk about how to compare alternatives to Microsoft Premier Support. We'll take questions. We anticipate a lot, so we're going to keep this content short to make room for as many questions as we can possibly tackle. And then at the end, of course, we're going to do a $50 giveaway for an Amazon gift card.
Perfect.
All right. So, Brad, take it away. What do we know about Microsoft Premier Support?
Yeah, so, typically companies, be it, large or medium or even small enterprise companies often sign a contract for Microsoft Premier Support and purchase basically a bank of support hours with Microsoft for their IT team to use whenever they need help. And a lot of companies, what they do with that typically is that issues that they can't resolve with their internal team, that's what they're using this bank of hours for. So just think of it that way, from an IT bank support subscription that Microsoft basically negotiates with each and every single company that's out there. So on the surface, no pun intended, it makes sense to go straight to the source of the trouble and ask Microsoft for help. So I think a lot of people assume, well, it's Microsoft issues. I think that it makes the most sense to go right to the source for that, and they should be able to resolve those issues quickest, right? I mean,
Sure.
That would make the most sense to most folks. And there's no doubt that Microsoft takes really good care of some of its largest and most important clients, and we know that to also be true. But we also keep hearing from many small to medium-sized enterprise clients about a few common problems with Microsoft Premier Support, and that's stemming from support calls going overseas to call centers. And anybody who's ever had to experience this, be it with Microsoft Premier Support or any other service that you can possibly name from a customer service standpoint, sometimes dealing with folks that are overseas might be problematic.
Well, and it's kind of a compounding problem, right? You're obviously calling because something is wrong. It's escalated beyond what you can handle in-house. It's a stressful situation that you need support.
Yeah, absolutely. And all right, think of it this way. I think in most experiences when people have had to talk to call centers that are overseas, probably weren't life and death types of situations, right?
Good point.
But they kind of sometimes turn into very frustrating situations when you're trying to get the help, and either the person doesn't know enough to be able to escalate the problem, at a level that is sufficient to getting your problem resolved. And then you might have to explain things over and over again. That can also be a problem, especially if you've already done it once or twice. It's like, well, aren't these people communicating? And let's face it, when we get right down to it, there's no real better way to say it than, language can be a really big challenge in dealing with overseas support centers. And I think one of the other things that this compounds to is that, okay, all of these things lead up to slow response. We're not teaching anybody anything new in regards to that. But I think also part of the problem too is that you never get to know or get a feeling or a sense of um, having getting to know people on the other side of that fence. So if I was in a support or a subscription model, I'd like to know that there are people that I can actually get to know and understand and pick up the phone and actually call those people. You're never going to get those types of things in these larger call center environments.
That's a great point. So, going back to that cumulative, that snowball effect, you're already stressed out. It's a challenging situation. Your needs have escalated beyond what you have, available for this support. The language is a challenge. You're getting passed along as it gets escalated from person to person. This is slowing down your response time.
Correct, and so that's the cut by death by a thousand
Yes.
cuts scenario, right? You're getting to the point where, first of all, these situations, especially when dealing with escalations and fixes that need to happen, usually they're time sensitive. So having to go through this process, which sometimes can be very, very well, frustrating. So as a result of that, you're not getting a good it's not good for you as the end client moving forward because of those reasons. You're not having a good experience.
Now, that's not the case for everyone involved with Microsoft Premier Support.
Sure, and that absolutely isn't. Look, Microsoft is a partner, and we understand. We call Microsoft,
Yep.
right? And so when there's unique circumstances, we're absolutely going to call Microsoft and go through bug fix solutions, and we do that on an ongoing basis. But Microsoft also knows that we're not going to cry wolf. So that's one of the things that one of the feathers that we can actually put in our cap. But let's think of it this way. It only makes sense if you're talking to reasonable people. When you pay a premium rate, Microsoft's really going to take good care of you.
Yes.
Okay. So that it's going to be one of two things: either that great rate, or the other thing that's going to happen is you might have negotiated a very agreeable blended hourly rate with Microsoft. But if you don't have, if you have not bought enough hours, or if you've bought, a large bulk of hours, again, you're going to be in that, let's say upper tier service criteria. There's really no better way, to put it. But I think also if you're talking to a reasonable person, we understand that Microsoft will negotiate, obviously, these rates. They're not hard and fast on what the hourly blended rate's going to be. And so that we've seen clients who come to us who've basically shared with us, what those blended rates, those blended hourly rates look like. And the thing is that congratulations.
Yeah.
You've been able to get a great rate, but what was the true cost?
Right.
True cost is something that I think folks are really going to have to start understanding and realizing, because there's a dollar and cent side to it, but did you actually end up paying more as a result of having longer conversations, multiple conversations with different people? Were your hours 6 hours when they really only needed to be one? These are calculations that you have to also make when you're dealing with what's called true cost, to understand, did you really get a good deal? Yeah, you negotiated prices down to a low blended hourly rate, but how many of those did you actually use? And that's when you start understanding, true cost as far as that's concerned. They will sacrifice price, but you also are going to sacrifice support too, in many cases, and look at that parallel that goes between support and a negotiated price. And that's what we found out talking to many of our current clients, is that they were able to successfully negotiate a lower rate, but that came at a cost.
There you go.
So, they can, let's face it, Microsoft can afford to go low on price because they'll outsource the support to oversee call center. And anybody who's been utilizing Microsoft Premier Support already knows this. There's no industry trade secrets being let out here. We understand what the situation, what it truly is at this point.
Yeah, and that's worth clarifying, that there is a possibility to get USA-based support from Microsoft. You're just going to pay a lot for that. And as their price comes down, your support goes out.
Correct.
offshore.
That's a very safe assumption. Yes.
All right, so that's what makes it hard to compare Microsoft Premier support to its alternatives because everything is on such a sliding scale. So what's kind of your how-tos on what to look for when you're looking at
Yeah,
alternatives?
well, and I think we've justified and we've kind of made it sure people understand. It's not always clear with them what's included at what cost. So you as a potential client, you're going to have to really ask a lot of questions when you're going through this process. So some of the things that you're going to look at when you're looking at alternatives, start with what you need from a support standpoint. And the easiest way to do this is checking your logs. Okay, there is a report that comes out. You should have an understanding of exactly what you're using those support hours for, and understanding that will kind of point you in the right direction. So one of the questions you should be asking yourself is maybe could a managed service provider with, say, 20 years of experience with Microsoft technologies and 1.9 billion logins managed, can a company like that provide the coverage needed for the apps in your stack? And I would say yes, because I'm just describing ourselves in a shameless plug right there, of course. So yes, these are things to consider. Is USA back support important? Again, I'm not answering the question for you. You need to answer these questions yourself. What is the response time in the SLA? Is a quick response time important? Would it be if the Microsoft application issue was business critical? Understanding these items. A couple more. Is it a dedicated technical account manager? Is that important to you? Is a dedicated engineer important? So a DSE, a designated support engineer, or what about emergency support? Here, I'll give you a few more that you can write down as well. And again, we're going to have this on recorded for you, so if you miss something, we
got
can absolutely go back for it. Are upgrades and migrations included in those hours? What about health checks, training, advisory services? When do unused support hours expire? I think this is another one that might catch people a bit off guard. So there's a whole litany of questions to ask when you're looking at potential alternatives to Premier support.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about, is a dedicated TAM important versus a shared one? Well, maybe that isn't necessarily a requirement. But like you said, if you've got the right amount of support hours that that you've budgeted, that you've planned for to last this contract, but you come to the end of the year and you haven't used them all, and they just go away, is that really what you wanted to budget for? Is to have those just flushed? So if you answered yes to any of those questions, then that should help you kind of nail down what price that you want to pay to include what level of support you're looking for.
Correct. And so one of the things too is, again, we understand the dynamics that are at play with a lot of companies. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the IT departments aren't maybe in congruence with the CFO or procurement, right? Sometimes it's about the lowest dollar. Well, guess what? Companies have adjusted to that, especially larger companies, i.e. Microsoft and many other companies as well. You want to negotiate a lower price? You want to race to the floor? Great. There are companies out there more than willing to go that direction with you, but there's sometimes a huge sacrifice as a result of that. So sometimes it takes education internally, and sometimes you just need to educate up. I know that's also easier said than done sometimes in corporate structures, but it's about that education and really understanding, yes, there's a lower rate, but how much of that is actually spent? And then let's say you're buying 800 hours, of service, right? If that 800 hours, what happens after that 800 hours is exhausted? And let's say you've exhausted it, that's what you had budgeted for the year. What if you exhaust that in, let's say, September or October? Well, you're going to have to go back to Microsoft and buy more hours, right? You're gonna have to, and that's true of anybody who's going to do this type of work with you. But if you're buying more of those hours then at that hourly blended rate, and you blew through them, in half of the year or 3/4 of the year, what are you paying? What is your blended hourly rate over the negotiated annual agreement? These are important questions to ask too. And again, it's having these conferences, having these meetings with your internal folks that understand and approve budgeting for you to make sure that you're getting exactly what you need.
Yeah, well, and and Brad touched on our upgrades and migrations included. So, that's, you got to not only look at what applications in the stack are covered, but what projects fall inside and outside of the scope of what's included with those applications.
Correct.
So if you're planning on making a huge upgrade in software and it's not covered by those hours, then that's definitely gonna skew your what you budgeted.
Yep, you're outside of scope, and you've got another budget that you're dealing with at this point.
That's absolutely that's a key point to keep in mind when you're laying this all out. All right, so with Fpweb.net, we list our prices right on the website.
Correct.
And the website is fpweb.net/managed-services/premier-support. Yeah, just want to make sure I got that right.
That's okay. And if you get to the site, you'll see it. And if you want to call us, that's fine too. We'll point you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things I want to point out is a little bit about that pricing, and I think we probably have some questions revolving around this as well.
Tends to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But while our prices are listed, just like with where Microsoft will go through and tell you what the price is for their it's dependent on your unique need. Okay, and so when I mean that, the listed prices are a starting point. And they're typically that with any company that's out there. It's really dependent on what your specific needs are and what you're looking to do. So if you ask the question, well, are these rates negotiable? They are, but they are for a reason. It's not because we start off high to be able to reduce it to get you to a lower price. It's because everybody's solution is going to be have different needs. So one of the things I think you'll remember earlier in the webinar, we talked about understanding what your needs are, and that's going to those logs, understanding what the needs are, and the reason why we can negotiate that blended hourly rate, and then we will advise you on the amount of hours that you ultimately would need in an annual subscription. The reason why we're able to do that is because we can understand if you're heavy on some support hours and less on others, there's going to be a different potential rate for that.
Good point.
There can be savings involved as a result of really understanding what your support needs truly are, and that can sometimes work the other way if you're heavier on some items that are not going to be going to be more difficult or time consuming to do. Well, yeah, sure, some of those, but it really balances out. So really the conversation you ultimately want to get to is, what does your blended hourly rate look like, and how many hours do you really need? And that's how you can really compare oranges to oranges.
Very good. And to set up an opportunity to discuss your unique needs, all you have to do is send us an email to sales@fpweb.net or give us a call at 866-780-4678, and you can ask to talk to Brad.
You bet. You betcha.
Well, Brad, I think we're about halfway through. I'd love to dive into some of these questions that are starting to stack up, and of course, if this jogs your interest in asking something else, go ahead and put it in the queue, and we'll start diving into these. The first one that I'm seeing is, the pricing you have for Microsoft seems to be different than my contract with Microsoft.
Yep. Okay. This is exactly what we were just talking about, right? So you're right. We have a comparison chart online where you can compare our pricing with the listed pricing for Microsoft, and you'll find that ours is less, but then everybody goes back to, hey, your pricing for Microsoft is way out of skew. That's because Microsoft negotiated a price with you dependent on what your needs actually are, and we're going to do the same if we have the opportunity to have that conversation with you. Each quote will be an individual quote, and it will be specific to whatever your needs are. So we find that Microsoft Premier Support contracts vary greatly by customer, like enterprise agreements. And in most cases, customers are overpaying either an actual rate or the level of support or responsiveness. So be aware of that. And products supported engineer expertise level, response time, native language, and total MS spend are variables that can affect Microsoft Premier support contracts as well.
Okay, good, good. Here's a question. Are we going to receive a copy of this via email? Yes. After this is over, we're going to send a link both to the copy of this webinar, the recording of it, I should say, as well as a link to register for the next one. And in terms of the pricing and the features we're talking about, it's available at fpweb.net/manage-services/premiers-support, which is on the screen right now.
Yes,
yeah.
that's a long one, so it's hard to remember, but it is on the screen.
Here's another question, Brad. I think you might know the answer to this. I do not mind waiting an hour for Microsoft to return my call, knowing that I have qualified individuals with access to millions of internal knowledge bases, as well as access to several teams who know the product inside and out. I may get a call back in 6 minutes with you guys, but am I getting the same type of knowledgeable support that Microsoft can offer?
Yeah, and that's a very fair question and a very good question. So let me speak to that. Our folks who get that support request ticket at Fpweb.net will immediately get started on troubleshooting that ticket. They have access to our extensive knowledge base here that has been built up over 20 years of managing Microsoft applications, plus the experience gained from working with so many different kinds of environments. And here's the other thing. This is not an auto reply within 6 minutes saying that your request has been received, and then 3 days go by, and you know, we're at a point where nobody's even actually starting on the ticket, right? It's a live person on our staff jumping on with, you know, within 6 minutes, and it's a business, and if it's a critical business use, okay, in that scenario. The difference between 6 minutes and 60, that can be paramount.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about, earlier we were talking about life and death situation. All right, that's probably not the case here. But if it's business critical, if we're talking about your company losing money, then all of a sudden the difference between 6 and 60 is pretty
significant.
Yeah. All right, next question says, when it comes to resolving issues with the product, how often does Fpweb.net reach out to Microsoft directly?
Yeah, so in 2016, we reached out to Microsoft directly for about, and the stat was 0.004% of customer support requests. So that's not a whole lot. And think of it this way. So for every 200 issues, we have one that needs Microsoft assistance to resolve, and that's typically a code or a patch update. But I want to make sure that people understand, due to the fact that we've had so much experience, and we are, you know, we have a direct line to Microsoft as well. When those needs arise, we absolutely do have that conduit.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. This question says, what about Macs? So if we're talking about Microsoft applications on Macintosh, on Apple products, yes, that support is included.
Absolutely. Yeah. It absolutely is. We've got another one here. Do you have any leverage with Microsoft to get bugs fixed faster? You know, this is interesting. The reason why it's interesting is because, do we have leverage? Well, yes, because we're a paying client. Yeah. Okay. But guess what? You're a paying client of Microsoft as well in many cases.
True.
Okay. So as a result of that, you have the ability to, you know, we are going to contact them directly. And I think you heard me say earlier, because of all the years of experience that we've had, they know that we don't cry wolf.
Right.
Okay. So we can, in many cases, get things resolved a bit quicker. And as far as repairing bugs, you know, we've done this at volume with them in the past, so we are trusted. But it also helps when you have two clients, you know, trying to get the same thing fixed. It's going to benefit the end client as a result.
Okay, all right. The next one says, do I still need my enterprise agreement with Microsoft?
Do you still need my enterprise agreement with Microsoft?
Right.
Well, you know, that's a question for you. your CIO, and your CFO. Some companies are finding that they can drastically reduce their Microsoft bill by dropping EA and buying or slash renting only what they truly consume and then outsourcing their Microsoft support services to a third-party provider like Fpweb.net.
Okay.
But that's something that you would want to discuss, internally as far as that's concerned.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of depends on your situation. All right. This one says, are health checks done remotely or on site? That was one of the variables that we mentioned earlier as a way to try and nail down some points of comparison between Microsoft Premier Support and their alternatives. So
you bet. And we've done both. We can establish a secure connection into your farm, or we can send some of our top engineers to your site, which is a little different than I think what Microsoft might do. I'm sure you can negotiate that if you'd like, so that they can spend a few days looking at things on-prem. It's usually more efficient for everyone involved to do these via remote access, so that is much more common, but yes, it can be done.
Okay. All right. And let's see. This says, how many users can call in?
How many users? So this is customer discretion. 2 or 3 seems to be the norm, but beyond 5 has historically caused heartache for customers, and we understand that. Our safety protocols require that they must be on the customer's tech contact or admin list to submit a support request. So that's, I guess, the easiest way to make sure that that's actually being taken care of.
Well, now I would think that most people would appreciate those safety protocols being in place.
Right. So we've actually talked to customers in the past, say, well, we've got 20. Okay, even in those scenarios, we have found that with larger enterprise folks, it's not always 20. It could be any of the 20, but it's not the 20 that's typically coming in. So we say, look, it can be 5, it could be 7, whatever the case might be. But we do like the advantage of working with somebody else like us is that the folks on each side get to know each other. And I think that's a big plus for a company like us is that you want that relationship, because ultimately by having that relationship, you get to know the other person, and you're going to be able to get things done a lot quicker.
Yep, I agree. All right, we've got 3 minutes. Do you want to take one more?
Sure, let's take another one.
All right. This one's all right. Well, here's one. Domain-based computer is stuck on the please wait screen. Consult Microsoft Knowledge Web, and there are many reasons for this. So I do a system restore, and I'm back up and running. Now, what is the solution to such a problem? Is it third-party software or network location services? So this is a little more technical.
Yeah, I wish we had one of our subject matter experts here as far as, but here's the advantage. Again, this is a perfect example of dealing with something like us, with us. This is the type of support ticket that would come in. You would have one of our, in this case, a level 1 engineer take a look at this first and be able to provide a common response to this. And if it wasn't something that they have the knowledge base for, it quickly gets escalated, so we're not repeating the same type of question over and over again in a support model.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's getting worked within 6 minutes.
That is absolutely correct.
By experts. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, well, those are fantastic questions. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to email a link of this recording along with the registration link for our next webinar, which will be about SharePoint hosting. Next Tuesday, 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That's March 14th. And now it's time to announce the winner of our $50 Amazon gift card. Drum roll, please, as I go through the hat. And we'll go with Joseph Roberts Jr. All right.
Joseph, congratulations on your $50 gift card.
Thank you very much, everybody.